Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy. We are here today to give our review on Eternals, which is, of course, the latest Marvel film, at least until a month's time when we get the new Spider-Man film. This is directed by Chloe Zhao with an all-star cast in the film. And I think this has been quite divisive, this one so far, judging by initial reviews. I did try and stay away from initial reviews as much as possible and go in with, a clear head, clear mind. And we have lots to discuss with this one. So before we do so, over to George with the socials.
Absolutely, guys. So as always, if this is the first Marvel video of ours you've watched, we've had a lot on this year, so you can comment below your thoughts on Eternals. This is a spoiler discussion, so anything you want to put them in the comments. We'll bring them up. We'll chat about them. So we're going off the grid for this. We're not doing it like some other films where we do it scene by scene. We're going to do a normal style review, but completely filled with spoilers, and we'll also speak about the credit scenes at the end, which I forgot to put in the schedule. That being said, hit that like button, do subscribe. As Chris said, there's a lot more Marvel stuff on the way. We've got Hawkeye coming out. There'll be a season review at the end. We've got a lot of Spider-Man stuff happening. We've got so much stuff happening on the channel. And at the start of the year, we did an MCU retrospective on the Infinity Saga because it got to have a lovely cut-off. So if you do like Marvel, have a check of some of them as well. I think the link is in the description below. And that being said, also, if you're new, hit us up on social medias, Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy, and we have a link to TeePublic in the description below. So find us all on those. As I said, we've got so many videos coming out. We're going to go over them at the end. It's got to a point now I've got to put them in their own scroll bar because there's so many. But yes, talking Eternals, we've already got Martin in the comments, and we've also got Carl as well. Looking forward to hearing about both of you. So, first off, as we always talk about these films, we always mention thoughts going into this film. You mentioned straight away it's divisive, but I want to see before the reviews or anything like that, what was your initial thoughts on the trailers and the concept?
Just on the concept alone, and I'm not going to lie, I didn't really know anything of the concept. Even from the trailers that came out, it all seemed very vague and mysterious, and just this was the cosmic one, right? Like we've had cosmic Marvel films before, but this was really the one where, judging from the trailer, this was the deep lore one. This is going like, far into the, verses of space. This is going to reinforce everything that comes up in the later MCU, possibly teeing up future villains and going into the weird side of Marvel. And from that side, I thought this could be one of the most ambitious Marvel films we've had so far. I'm kind of hit and miss on, a lot of the Marvel films. We had Black Widow, which I wasn't a big fan of. And I was looking forward to see, especially with Chloe Zhao as well, with a name like that attached. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of Nomadland, but even to get like a director's director in, if you know what I mean, someone who has won Oscars, best film, everything like that, just to see them put their own stamp on a film essentially, and not have kind of Disney or Marvel breathing down their necks, and let me see a Chloe Zhao film in the Marvel universe, so from that alone, I was cautiously optimistic for it. The trailers didn't really sell me or get me jazzed for it. And, with so many Marvel films coming out every other couple of months, it's difficult to get hyped for a Marvel film because, there's always another one right around the corner, or they're probably signed on to multiple picture deals or something like that. I really honestly didn't know what to think. So when I sat down in that movie theater last night, and I did make the mistake of seeing this at 10 p.m. last night, this is a very long film, and that's going to probably come into my criticisms in just a minute. I was kind of clueless, so I was relying on the film's very nice opening title sequence and hopefully prologue to kind of get me invested into the world and kind of make me understand a little bit what the Eternals are all about. So I guess that's my preamble before going in. How about you? Were you aware of these characters or the premise or what the Eternals were?
I'm in a bit of a weird one. So I've got two friends that I watched it with yesterday. One of them's really big on the lore side of Marvel stuff. So this is one of the films that's hyped up a lot for me over the last sort of year or two. And I think the way I kind of approached this year was we knew we were getting 4 Marvel films. Shang-Chi I didn't know anything about, so I didn't really have any hype, and I didn't like the trailers. Obviously, Black Widow, I knew exactly what we're going to get. It's a prequel about someone that's already died. And Spider-Man, we still technically don't know what we're going to get, but we all kind of know what we're going to get. So it's one of them where I think Eternals was the one at the start of the year that stuck out the most for me. This was the one that it was going to be new characters. As you said, they brought in an Untitled with Chloe Zhao, which is going to be a really interesting discussion. Just coming off the back of Nomadland. I mean, she was hired for this whilst filming Nomadland. So I believe, I think it was the Rider or something like that, the film before, which I've not seen. But the trailers didn't do an awful lot for me, in truth. Now, the cast I was intrigued by. That is a massive draw for me. The cast they were able to bring in for this. But the trailers didn't do anything. But I went into the mindset of, am I going to get a film about the lore of Marvel, about Celestials, about this? And I was like, I'm ready for something a bit new, a bit different. And I'm actually I've got a quick comment here by Pete I wanted to mention as well. He tried to get into the red carpet. They had 29 wristbands. Yes, I'd seen that red carpets are back, and I saw a few people get into it, but 29 wristbands at an event. They did, I think, 4 premieres for this film, which is very rare. I think they are trying to get word of mouth out as much as they can, which is a sign of, obviously, a discussion that's going to happen. But before tomorrow, I'm not going to lie, I was very shocked at I don't read reviews of films I watched before films just on the principle. I like to go in at least cold. But it's very hard to avoid knowing the Rotten Tomatoes score when every person on bloody Twitter seems to tweet it every 2 minutes, because this is the first Marvel film that's hit Rotten on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, is it actually in Rotten now? I didn't know what it was currently on.
I think is at 49%, and it's a really interesting one because it is nowhere near that bad off initial instinct. But the conversation that I think a lot of people are having, because of how much critics and filmmakers like Chloe Zhao, a lot of people feel this is a Chloe Zhao film that is trapped by Marvel, but it is also a Marvel film that's got somebody coming on like Chloe Zhao who isn't the normal Marvel type of director. And there's been a really fascinating tug of war with the opinions online about it. And normally it's not the normal aggro, but unfortunately, what I've noticed with the Marvel fans, which is something I'm going to bring up, like DC, it's got petty. Suddenly, we're not critics. I don't call us critics. We're obviously fans of these films as well. When I see people running around crying, saying, no, we don't care about critics' opinions, we don't like this, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you've mocked DC fans for 10 years now because all of your films have been critically acclaimed, financially acclaimed, whatever you want to put. And the first time out of 26 films, how was it, 25?
26 this one is, yeah.
One get Rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, which is a bloody very good ratio. I think any film company would take that. And I just want to bring that up as an instinct because the childish reactions to people disliking this film is insane. And I'm seeing people talking about the Rotten Tomatoes audience score. The audience score has been broken for years. But they really want to look into it. The audience score is lower than every other Marvel film from this year. So that's just something to think about. But yeah, heading into this, I don't even want to say I was a bit nervous. I just, because the trailers hadn't done much, I was like, okay, I just hope I enjoy it. And then the runtime came out. And I was like, okay.
That caught me off guard. I didn't realize it was going to be 240. Yeah. Was it 243? It's probably a little bit Marvel, over.
You've got to stay till the end of the credits as well. So it's not like some films where you can just get up and go. And I think one thing that, I don't know if I said this to you or to my friends, but, Infinity War was, I think, 2 hours 40. And that was earned. That was 10 years of this franchise, a story accumulating the 10 years. And then for this is, we'll get into it probably a bit overly ambitious, being 2 hours 40, like a first film for not just the director in the Marvel, but an ensemble cast. That's a lot of time to give. And the story itself, we'll get into key bits of it, I guess we can say, but I understand why it's so long. And I don't think it helped its case at all, as far as I'm concerned, as my initial thought.
See, I don't understand why it's so long. With the story that this film has, there is no reason that this film needs to be 2 hours 40. I am fine with a long film. You guys all know my favorite films of all time, clocking at over 4 hours, well over 4 hours. A runtime for a film is always beholden to the story it's telling. And ultimately, I'm not going to give everything away, but it's another world-ending plot, that they've got to foil the bad guy. You don't need 2 hours 40 to tell that. Going off what you just said right there, Endgame, absolutely, it was, for all intents and purposes, it was the finale as far as I'm concerned of the MCU. It still is in my mind. I know that the MCU is charging on ahead with various TV shows, more films than, it's humanly possible to watch in a year almost, but it was justified. There was a story there. It was the culmination of everything. There were a lot of characters that they were juggling in that film. This is an ensemble film along with that, and it's also having, to introduce these characters. But I tell you another Marvel film that was an ensemble cast, which was also set in space and had to introduce, these characters fresh to a average Joe audience that probably doesn't know them. Guardians of the Galaxy. Do you know how long that film was? 2 hours, 2 minutes. And it's... You don't need almost 3 hours to tell this story. I was on the ropes with this runtime. It felt like, you know, that feeling where you're locked into a roller coaster and it's like, and it starts moving. And it's like, I can't get off this thing. This film just felt like it just kept going and going and going. And like the final act was happening. And obviously it's like, you know, the big noisy CGI punch 'em up. And I didn't care what was going on. I didn't care about any of the characters or the situation. And it felt like the natural point for the film to end. And I don't know if it did a fade to black. I don't know if it did like a Return of the King. It faded out, and I thought, oh, thank Christ, I can get ready to like get up and leave. And then it carried on, and there was more of an epilogue with characters that I didn't care, and it felt like it built to another little mini climax at the end of the film, and then I had to stay in what seemed like endless amount of credits as well for the 2 credit scenes. So this was almost like purgatory for me, this film. And it's a shame because there were moments of the film, mostly towards the beginning, where I was actually kind of invested. Like the deep lore. This film opens with a text screen, as I mentioned.
Yeah, I laughed at that. It was like the Bible or something. Like
Yeah,
it wasn't normal text. It was scrolling down paragraphs and paragraphs.
Yep.
I was like, okay, I'm in this now. I've got to concentrate, and that was probably the most concentrating I had to do.
Yeah, it was like Blade Runner, and I was reading it, and you know, I love my mythologies and, you know, legends and all that stuff. So I was lapping it up, but even I was like having to go back and reread sentences and go back to the previous paragraph and read a bit. I was like, okay, so we've got a dude called Arisham who's like the god of gods, and he creates. It's intense, and you know, if people are, I don't want to talk down about movie-going audiences, but if they are the type that just like their, you know, escapist punch 'em up movies, that might be a lot for them to take on. And there were a few of those moments throughout the film, but that was, if I was going to give a positive, because I'm probably going to give a lot of negatives on this film in all honesty, but if I were to give it a positive, it was that lore side of things. And I kind of wish that that had been the whole film. This film structured very, very weirdly for me. It started off good, and you know, and then it jumps to present day, as most of these Marvel films usually do. And we spend a little bit of time there, and then all of a sudden we're back, and we ignore a lot of character. You know, when you introduce characters at the beginning, not all the time, but usually they're going to be your main characters. Like, for example, Kit Harington, and there's like this kind of romance thing they're building with Cersei's character, and then he's just gone pretty much for all of the film. And we jump back to, what is it, like 5,000 BC or something? We go back to Mesopotamia. But then we stay with the Eternals in like however many thousand BC for like a good chunk of it. And then we jump back, and then it jumps back to another. I was all over the place with this. And usually I can follow things like that, but I don't understand why it was structured in that way. It was very frustrating. And I think because of that, that also added to the reason why I couldn't really gravitate to any characters. I was like, okay, am I meant to be becoming attached to Kit Harington's character? But then he's gone. Like, I don't care about his character by the end of the film because there's been no time spent with him, you know?
I'm in this thing. Actually, a really good talking point is the structure. I think that's the weakness of the entire film. I mean, there's a few issues, but I think I said it to it. I think it's a nonsensical plot. You said it earlier. It save the world. It doesn't need to be 2 hours 40. But when they're taking us to 5,000 BC, whenever they come in and we're seeing these historical moments over the years, which were all over the trailers, I'm going to add, and then you got like a minute or two with the actual interesting ones, and half of the film wants to be set in modern day, which I would say should have been the entire film, and then they have to shoehorn in why these people didn't interact for the history of the human race, which I understand. And I think they lost far too much time doing this second narrative explaining why they don't get involved. And I actually think it was one of the problems of the film was this narrative structure. I understand you can't start in 5,000 BC, work your way up to current times, but even I mean, this is spoiler, so I'm going to say it now, last chance. Click X now off the screen if you don't want a spoiler. Before, I'm just calling James Bond, before Richard Madden killed... I keep she's called Ajax, but I keep thinking of Ajax, the football team.
Salma Hayek.
Salma Hayek, yes. Before he kills, like, okay, so we've got another flashback going 6 days before, and I get it. But even the way in which these narratives started was really weird. It was like a few days ago, and this is where I was torn because I think a lot of that comes down to editing. And one thing a lot of people have spoken about online is that Chloe Zhao normally edits her own films, and I believe that she wasn't. She wasn't credited as an editor in this. And there's another conversation other people have spoken about. Her partner is normally the cinematographer. he wasn't allowed to be cinematographer in this film. They brought in normal Marvel. If you look at the cinematographers, it's like done 5 Marvel films in a row. And the problem with Marvel is there's not really a style, which is Marvel's style, is that they don't have a style. And when you see decisions like that, again, it comes down to, I think Chloe Zhao did get a lot of power in this film, but are there certain things which doesn't work? Is this her having to bend her will for Marvel, or is this her struggling going from small indie films to a gargantuan blockbuster? Because Marvel's had such a good track record with getting the indie directors in, and obviously this isn't any indie director, this is now an Oscar winner. It's a really fascinating insight because I think I was lost with the structure. I cared for certain characters, and then as you said, they get written out and disappear. Just as I mean, we'll go into the characters properly shortly, but the biggest one for me was Barry Keoghan, who played Droog, the one from Dunkirk for people that are more familiar with faces. He was by far the most interesting one they'd set up, and he just disappeared and didn't come back. And then he kind of disappeared again, and because it's juggling an ensemble, but it doesn't develop anyone from the ensemble. I'm just really going to quickly bring up comment by Cole. Has Phase 4 been a misfire compared to what's come before? It doesn't feel like the MCU story has moved forward. I'm going to hold judgment and say Spider-Man and Doctor Strange will be my answer for that question.
I think the TV shows have done a better job of moving the story forward than the films
This
have.
is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen next year is these films are planned so far in advance. And I had a really good theory. I know this is the time set, so I'm just going to say it now before I forget it again. When I was coming out yesterday, I thought for a minute, is Eternals going to be the film that sets up all of Phase 4? Because that was always a rumor. Could Eternals set up X-Men? Could Eternals set up other elements from Marvel? And me and my friend had this chat in the car, and then I thought, I think there was probably at some point the reason they made Eternals was to push Marvel forward. But now we're getting the multiverse because of Spider-Man, and only because of Spider-Man and the Sony stuff we're getting a multiverse. I think the multiverse is now the answer to that question, that what Eternals probably would have kickstarted is now all going to be part of the multiverse. Needs a new character that existed in that other world that we don't need to show anymore. Need the X-Men? Now we can probably implant something from the multiverse being fractured and now they're being mutants. So it's a very interesting question. I mean, Phase 4 is gargantuan, looking at the slate. So it's a very tough one to answer now. But what I would say is two of the... I mean, is Black Widow Phase 4? Technically, it is,
officially, it just felt like more baggage, more carryover from what's come before, completely unnecessary. And we said that in the review, didn't we, as a film?
So Shang-Chi, for me, beautiful starting point for a new era. Bringing in new characters, don't need to be connected to the others. Eternals brings in new characters, doesn't need to be connected, but misfires. And then I think Spider-Man's going to go balls to the wall. I think Spider-Man works, we're safe. If it doesn't work, we're absolutely screwed. And we're going to have to hope Sam Raimi saves the day once more. Sorry, I've talked for a lot of time. I'm going to hand over.
No, I think it's going to be interesting to see what audiences think of this. I was kind of like predicting how this might go, because a lot of people... I mean, it was a late screening, as I mentioned. There were a number of people that had fallen asleep towards the end of this film, or periodically. I was looking around. I could see people's sort of like heads slumped back like this, leaning on people's shoulders. I almost drifted off a few times. I think this is going to have a very big opening weekend. Of course it is. It's the new Marvel film. But I think it's going to have a colossal drop-off on that second week. I think word of mouth isn't going to be great. I think the runtime is going to put a lot of people off. And I don't see this having the staying power. I don't see this having the staying power for multiple viewings either. Spider-Man, Christmas release day, everyone's going to go and watch it. Everyone's probably going to go and see it multiple times, all ages. I was restless at this. Could you imagine a kid who loves Marvel films going to see this and keeping their concentration for nearly 3 hours for this film? You know, I don't see it, to be honest.
It's if you're familiar with Cinema Score, so they're essentially like a poll system in America that audiences do as they leave the cinemas. They always do it on the opening night. This got a B. So that would have been everyone who went yesterday in America. Is obviously, well, it's like a randomizer questionnaire. It's got a B, which is the lowest MCU Cinema Score. Normally, comic book films as a whole get A's, A minuses. But the last one was Thor 1 that had a B plus in 2011. And that normally means word of mouth won't be strong. I think it's had a very good Friday opening, but I think the numbers are going to dwindle for today and tomorrow. And I think this could have a drop off next week. Now, their advantage is that there's no competition until Ghostbusters in 2 weeks' time, I think.
Yeah.
But it should have been Top Gun next week. Sorry, another reminder of what was taken from us. this film is going to struggle with word of mouth. I think the hardcore Marvel fans will go absolutely. My parents asked me, "Oh, how was it?" And I was like, "Yeah, go watch Spider-Man next month instead." And I'd even tell people, "You want to watch good films? Go watch The Harder They Fall on Netflix, which is like an hour and 45, great fun, and it's very watchable." And I think Eternals is going to be a struggle for a lot of people. I know this sounds like a very random thing. We're not even going into the characters, but this is, I think, the first time Marvel has had. I don't want to call it a problem. This is the first time Marvel hasn't had a claim in so long. And I think there's a bit of reality, not kicking in because that sounds unfair, but there are some people that can't accept that. And as I said, I understand if they're fans, they might be upset, but this happens to every franchise at some point or another. It drops off. Or, again, whether or not we think others are bad, but critically, one bad film in 26 is extraordinarily good. The fact that Iron Man, say what you want about Rotten Tomatoes, because it does have all the Darkwood at 66%. But at the end of the day, those were still technically fresh. And I'm not going to do the whole Rotten Tomatoes thing, but I do think critics have been way OTT because it's Chloe Zhao. I think a lot of them are disappointed that she did a Marvel film, which I can understand. But at the same time, directors want to be able to try and make films like this. I don't really know, but the audience is going to be very interesting for the next couple of weeks, especially as you said, the box office numbers. I think the second week drop off will be big. And Venom's had a really good American box office, and I think the biggest thing going for it's an hour and a half. It's so easy for people to go in and out. Telling people on a 2-hour 40 film, and I'm going to bring this up as well. One thing I think sort of ruined this film for me is watching Dune again loads recently, because not only Dune with Bond, we've had a lot of 2-hour 40 films recently, and they have flown by. They've had really good pacing.
Yeah.
And now I've had the first long one in a while that's really struggled, and it shows. And I'm also sat here saying, am I not this film, any film that's going to come after? Now I've seen Dune, a lore building, world building film. I'm sorry, Eternals didn't do it for me. I'm in my little Denis Villeneuve bubble now.
Well, hopefully he doesn't take on a Marvel film. I wonder what
he
Marvel
won't,
film he would take on. I don't think he ever would.
if anyone hasn't seen it, him and Chloe Zhao did an interview together because they're good friends in real life. So she was at the Dune premieres and stuff, and they did a round table, and he actually said this, and he goes, Chloe, I'm so surprised that you dropped down to do a Marvel film. It's not like you at all. And that was published online as well. So the man doesn't hold back. An absolute legend. She kind of awkwardly turned the conversation into how they both love Star Wars and stuff. And it was just absolute legend, Denis Villeneuve. I just love that he doesn't care what he says.
Yeah, no, fair play to him for that, for calling her out on it. But I don't blame her. And I mean, we shouldn't act surprised, people saying that, Chloe Zhao, fantastic director, and there's sort of like none of her stamp or creative input really into this film, at least not in the final film that we see. That's just Marvel. If you're going to be working for Marvel, you're playing by Disney/Marvel's rules, and you're going to make the film that they want to make come hell or high water. We saw that back in the past with Edgar Wright with Ant-Man, who I'm sure would have made a fantastic Ant-Man film. It would have been very different. It would have been funny. We know that they carried over some of the jokes and some of his ideas into the final film. Does he still have like a final credit in the Ant-Man film as like an executive producer or something?
I think he has an executive producer credit. It was on the news recently. This Marvel book's come out, and apparently they've got interviews with the cast saying that apparently Paul Rudd was on the verge of walking out when Edgar Wright did. Oh, because it was only, I think, a few weeks before filming. I remember him leaving, and one of the biggest testaments to Marvel's history is the fact that Ant-Man came out really good. I mean, I love Ant-Man, but I don't think anyone expects that film to be good given the production issues it has, and yet it's getting a trilogy, and he's been involved with Avengers and everything, and the testament to that. But no, it's
that being said, though, Ant-Man is a very cookie-cutter film. Like, you could equate it to Iron Man 1, for example, and that's not the Ant-Man film that you would have had with Edgar Wright. This is all hyperbole and everything, because it could have been a terrible film. It's a film that's never been made, but it would have been distinctly unique to that director's style, and that's something that I actually think DC are usually better for in letting directors make the films they want to make. Eventually, after years and multiple re-edits, a 4-hour version will come out of that director's work. But, you get films like Joker and everything like that, where a director has an idea and makes the film they want to make. Whereas with Marvel, to keep that uniform quality with them all, like this is contained in its own universe, there is more of that guiding hand on everything, I think. And I mean, there were some bits in this film that looked visually nice, from cinematography wise, but then there's also a lot of moments where you mentioned you don't know whether it was just, the studio kind of hampering her vision, or maybe she's not up to the task of a film like this, because when you do get to some of the action skirmishes, they feel very cheap, and they almost felt like CW TV show film for me, especially at the end. Like, it's pretty much in one location. It's on like a beach, and you've got these costumes that look absolutely ridiculous. They look like discount Power Rangers, like awkwardly fighting on a beach. And I actually don't even think the CGI was up to par with a lot of Marvel films during this film. A lot of the digital doubles. And of course, you're going to have that. You've got these characters that are basically like Superman. You've got ones like the Flash that are darting around 1,000,000 miles an hour. Of course, you're going to have to use digital doubles, but it just looks so crap and fakey fake, and there was no weight to any of the fight. And because I wasn't invested in any of the characters, and this could be a good springboard into that topic in general, I'm actually going to find it very difficult to talk about the characters in this film, because I don't think there were any characters in this film. I think you had a cast of either very good to, average to above average actors in there in the initial line of characters, but there's no meat to them. That I couldn't tell you anything about the characters. I think if I was going to pick someone who I thought was probably the best, it would be Richard Madden, because I do think he probably gets the most to do in the film and sort of like the more moral grey area of the character. But there were moments where it was like, okay, we're building something here with these characters, and it's mostly in the flashbacks to all the different historical events. And you mentioned, I always forget his name, the actor from Dunkirk,
Barry Keoghan.
Not the one who comes into it in the after credit scene, the other one, where they really establish like a sense of dividing the team and, moral questions. And that was the stuff that I loved in the film the most, was, these sort of like, guardian angels almost of the human race that were above the human race, that were living among them, teaching them their ways and kind of guiding them throughout life and throughout history. I love that stuff. And you had some that wanted to be more proactive and get more involved, and you had some that said, we need to take a step back and let them make their own choices. Free will, fate, all of that stuff. That was fantastic. And there was a moment in the film where I think a massacre's happening, or some genocidal conflict between two, different tribes of humans. And, one wants to get involved and stop them. He has the power to stop them and can do that. And then you've got Salma Hayek's character that's saying, that's too direct involvement. We need to let this play out as it is. And that was the stuff that I really enjoyed. But as you mentioned, after that, he's out the film. We don't really touch on that. We don't really delve into that stuff anymore. And then we're just kind of watching boring action with even more boring characters. And we roll round to the third act of this film. I just couldn't give a shit. In all honesty, I hate to say it like that, but I didn't care a single iota about any character, any emotional beat, if there was one, any relationship that they tried to form, because the film hadn't taken the time to develop it. It's one of the longest Marvel films at 240. There's so much runtime, and I just felt like they squandered it. A lot of this film, especially the middle act, it didn't feel like there was any kind of narrative thrust. It didn't feel like there was any urgency. And I actually don't think you really understand what's going on until pretty much like the very last bit of the film, where you really know what's going on, and then it's a race against time, and we've got to prevent this cataclysmic thing from happening. The whole second act is like a road trip movie where very, very slowly we're recruiting and sort of reconnecting with every single member of the ensemble. And it's a big ensemble, so that's a lot of moments to, we're jetting off to Mumbai to pick up this guy, now we're jetting off to here to pick up this character, and you spend so much time doing that they neglected the actual core relationships with the characters, I think, and the personalities and everything. And that's why when you get to the end, it was like I was watching cardboard cutouts punching each other, to be honest.
So I'm in this weird territory. I really like the characters, but all I can say is that none of them got developed. Pretty much none of them got developed, because the concepts are all there for all of them. I like to see, how have these people ingrained themselves in the earth for these 1,000 years? What have they done? What keeps them from being recognized? Blah blah blah. And some of them were able to get so much character out of small moments. I think the standout for me, I can never pronounce his name right, apologies, it's Kumail Nanjiani, who played Kingo, who's the Bollywood actor. That is the only character you really got to learn about the history of what they were doing, and he's very much the comic relief for this film. He's got his valet as well. But that was an amazing concept that he was developing. He loved hearing the stories from others, that when they all fell apart, he put himself into films to be able to witness stories. And it was really interesting in moments like that, and that's the most development we get from him. He disappears in and says, "Oh, actually, I agree with this Celestial. I'll see you all in a bit," and then he pops up on the ending, which is
And
really
that
weird.
joke just kept getting repeated as well, though, didn't it? The whole documentary thing.
That was funny, though. That was funny.
Yeah, but is it funny after like the 10th time they keep spinning that joke? That's the problem I had with it. Like
when they blow up the alien's head. I think that was the last one they do, and that was perfect. I got a big laugh yesterday, but this is my problem with it: is that he hasn't had development. We've just learnt about him. I'm just literally, I've got them all up here. We don't need to go through all 10 one by one, but let's go straight to, I'm just going to pick one at random. Okay. Brian Tyree Henry, he Americanized from Godzilla Kong. He played Fastos, who was the tech one, essentially. By far, one of the most interesting characters that we didn't get to develop either. We had very much the family lifestyle. When they said, "Oh, he lost his faith in the human race," that's a really interesting concept for someone that's immortal that has to stay on a planet. Show me what they do. Here's the trailer shot of Hiroshima and him saying, "I built this." I'm like, sorry if you can hear fireworks.
That was a great moment. I enjoyed that actually. Yeah.
This is it. And I wanted moments like that, not them chucking in Hiroshima for 10 seconds sake and being like, by the way, this happened. This is why he hates them, and moved on. And this is where I started to really struggle with it, because I wanted, I mean, we're getting a film about the creation of the atomic bomb. Thank you, Christopher Nolan, in 2023. But at the same time, I'm there like, I wanted to see what these characters were doing, because how are we going to develop him? Yes, we know he's going to lose faith in humans, but it's so easy just to say he built the atomic bomb. And that was in the trailers as well. And you'd think of all the time they wasted spending time in the past, something as important as Hiroshima or climactic as Hiroshima, to put this character on a journey for 70 years to be away from humanity. And it's something they didn't fall through with. They couldn't follow it up. And I liked the family dynamic with him. What made him change? What made him want to have a family? And you miss out on that kind of development. Another one I'm going to mention, her name's Lauren Ridloff, who played Makari, who's basically the Flash, the deaf one. I believe the very first deaf superhero. Really interesting that she mentioned she uses like the vibrations to be able to do it all and stuff. And has she been in the ship for the last 700 years? Like, the ship comes out and she's just been chilling there. And they're like, again, they've set up a really interesting dynamic with her and Barry Keoghan earlier in the film, and there's no payoff to it. I thought maybe, did someone kill her because she's not been reunited with them? Did someone lose the plot, kill her, and this has happened? And no, she was just on the ship the entire time, had nothing else to do. And this is where I really struggled. The only one I think got any development, aside from Cersei, because obviously she's the protagonist, that's absolutely fine, is the character called Gilgamesh, who was essentially the guardian for Angelina Jolie. I really enjoyed this character, and he's the only one that actually got a character arc, kind of. You get the sort of middle and end of the arc. You don't get the build-up to the arc. Why is he choosing to look after Angelina Jolie? We know he wants to because he's in love with her, but we don't see it, we're told it. And this is where I struggle with the character development, because I think there's some really interesting characters in this film. They just didn't get the payoffs. And I don't want to do a what shouldn't have happened thing. This could have been a fantastic TV show on Disney Plus.
I was thinking, I think, yeah, TV show, take your time, develop it across all the ages of history.
You could do some non-linear shit and have a 10-episode series where each episode is devoid to an actor and then it comes together for an accumulation. You could do anything. But batting in a 2-hour 40 runtime, so many characters got sacrificed. And I think there was interesting characters to dive into, and I think someone's maybe got to focus more on. I'm going to mention Sprite as well, essentially the girl from it.
That was weird.
Ridiculous.
That was a weird arc.
And it's a really interesting concept that because she's been trapped as a child, she can never experience essentially life like the others, which is a really intriguing concept. But to narrow that down to a crush on Richard Madden being the reason of the jealousy, lost so much character from that individual. And then it's like, you're going to become a human end, and you don't care because it's a bit weird. It's not weird she's fancied Richard Madden, but it's weird that the end point was a really interesting part. But just the key hook of she went off to join the villains. Like, what?
Yeah, there was no retribution for that at the end. Like she sides with the villain. She almost committed mass global genocide of the entire human race. And then there's no slap on the wrist or anything at the end, and she gets her wish of becoming human.
It's so.
I don't know.
And I just think the character development is lost. And I'd sit there normally saying, okay, so what was the story from the fact we've lost the character development? Oh no, the
There isn't
Earth's going
one.
to blow
Like,
up to create and this is where I've really
but
struggled
that
because I
comes
don't
in
do,
right at the end. That's what I'm saying. That
and it's the
plot
worst
point
part.
about the world,
The
it's the beginning of the
volcanoes,
third act. Yeah.
the volcanoes exploding. It's a really awful anticlimax. And you look at look at like the not to get into films like Equilibrium, right? What's the start point of the MCU at this point in time? Thanos has happened. Okay, cool. Eternals are on this planet. They're in the shadows, essentially guarding humanity. Okay, perfect. What is the end game from the film? What has changed? What has not even affected Marvel, but this? Nothing. No, oh, there's a kind of giant head in the ocean no one's concerned about. Um, and this is where I was really struggling because I wanted to like this film so much, but because we didn't get to develop any of those interests, I'd have much rather had a character piece with an awful story,
Hmm.
but we didn't. We got an awful story with no character development, and it's a really horrible mishmash. And it's a shame because, like I said, this film had potential. And looking at it, I'd look at this and say, you know what, I'm not going to sit here and say green light a sequel straight away. But then, like, there are characters here that can and should be developed as the years go by, but not many of them because so many of them lost their chance in this film to do so.
Hmm. And I was saying to you before we hit record that wasn't this what the plot for Transformers 6 was going to
Yes.
be? Well, I
Every
know that
Transformers film.
Transformers the last night, if I remember rightly, there were all these spikes that were cropping up across the world. They were kind of being unearthed or breaking through the earth. And it turns out that the earth was Unicron. There was something buried within the earth that was going to break out, burst out all across the world. And I'm guessing all the Transformers was going to have to stop them. So this is kind of your spiritual successor, ladies and gentlemen, for Transformers the last night. And
It
it
looked like a
feels like it.
Transformers film as well.
Yeah, it did.
The,
Look at that
the
poster. Tell me Michael Bay wouldn't do
I
something
don't
like that.
the design of the deviants I thought was
Oh,
awful.
Transformers. Do you know what they
Yeah,
remind me of? I think is it Dark of the Moon? There's that highway chase, and there's like the dreadlocked
yeah,
Transformers that are
that's it.
chasing them down. Really busy, chaotic designs, and it's just looks strange. And the CGI wasn't great on them either. I do have to
No,
say, especially when that one becomes like super intelligent and becomes a bit more humanoid, and he's got like six
yeah,
eyes, and
and
it's
it's Pennywise the clown voicing it, which is really pointless as well. Bill
Mhm.
Skarsgård. No, and this is, I mean, again, I can take a boring. I can see how many Marvel films, right, have had the most boring story but had great character development. And you know, when we did the retrospective, so many of them paint by the numbers. Oh, the Earth's ending. We're going to have to say that they're great. We get a fantastic origin film out of it. We learn so much. We get character pieces. And in this, we didn't get the character piece to go with the bad story. Now, some Marvel films, you could argue there's been a great story with no character development. I'd argue Infinity War, the only character development really is Thanos.
Mhm.
But that's telling this compelling story along the way. And this is where I'm kind of lost with Marvel. And again, going back to the writings of the Chloe Zhao stuff, you know, is this a fish out of water or is it something else? Because I think she's a very talented director. And I think we got to see some of her imagery. I mean, I know I've only seen Nomadland, and I love that film. And that's grown on me a lot over this last year. And there are some parts of this, you know, when Salma Hayek's chilling at a ranch and she's riding up on a horse, and some of the scenery looks great. And also, I want to mention, you can tell this is one of the only Marvel films shot on location
Yes, I
because
will
they're
say
so
that. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're not used to shooting on location. And now this sounds really dumb, so hold with me. It stood out like a sore thumb, and not in the best way, because you have this
Mhm.
great location moment, them on the beaches, and then an awful CGI creature jumping around on them, or an awful
Mhm.
CGI volcano in the background. But you can tell they're on set, and you know, I keep laughing at that Kevin Feige interview where he's like, you know, oh, you know, it's amazing to go on location. I was like, yeah, like this is normal for cinema. And I get, you know, and what's shown is that your spoilers do leak from your studios because that's why everyone knows about the new Spider-Man film and what keeps coming out from that. But I'm not going to say I want this in the studio. I'm glad they took the chance and shot on location. I think that's something Marvel need to do now.
Mhm.
It's something they've not done, and has been one of the biggest problems they've had.
Because wasn't that a thing? I don't know if they said it was a thing during Infinity War or if it was even before then. They pre-viz action
Yeah,
sequences before they've even
years in
kept the
advance.
script. Yeah,
Yeah,
because obviously you can if it's all in a computer, you know, just get it all done, and then
it's like
it doesn't
Mando.
matter what you shoot at the end because it's all probably going to be effects heavy anyway. Whereas, oh, we're actually filming on location. That means we actually need to plan and choreograph everything and how it's going to interact with real locations. No, I completely agree with you. From the opening scene where it was on the beaches, like the pebble beaches with the sea, and maybe it is also because we've recently watched Dune as well, which has been set on
Yeah.
location. I was kind of getting those vibes too with it. It does make a difference. Now it's still very CGI heavy at the end. Don't get me wrong. There are still those moments in there, but it was a noticeable visual difference, and I did chalk that up to Chloe Zhao's direction. So I would love more than that, because to me, shooting on location is just part and parcel with making a movie. You know, that's just what it should be, unless it is like a crazy space film, in which case, you know, building sets and everything, or you have got to turn to CGI. But there we go. There's another positive. Then, you know, well that's two asterisks. You know, but
let's talk. Also, I say
yeah.
we can talk one positive. I think we both have, which is the Celestial.
We're talking Arisham, like the big guy, the big head honcho,
if we want to
right?
now, let's go
we
into a
may
bit more
as well.
characters, because we mentioned we both wanted lore, and we get a whole lot of lore for 3 minutes of a 2-hour 40 film in the middle. Listen, from getting, you know, I said the trailers didn't wow me, but that one shot where it's just his face always had me every film. I was like, okay, what's going to happen here? I'm so intrigued by the Celestials, and it's the same Celestial design that you see in Guardians of the Galaxy 1, which is when the Collector's got the little screen, well, not the screen, the vision up. And this was a big thing. Okay, the Celestials put them there. What are we going to learn? And all the Celestial stuff looked incredible. The CGI looked incredible on those scenes.
Yeah.
When they're like, she's looking at all the memories and the walls. I was like, this is a really good scene. Why aren't we getting this kind of thing in other scenes and other parts of this film? And I was really getting aggravated. But we got so much deep lore about, you know, not the Infinity Stones, but the process of keeping.
It's before the Infinity Stones. It says in the
creation.
You know, that I think in Endgame, no, Infinity War. Sorry, I think. Oh God, I forgot his name now. The guy from Doctor Strange, Doctor Strange's friend. I forgot his name.
Wong?
Asian actor. Wong, yeah. He says, you know, in the beginning there was the Big Bang, and because of that we had the 6 Infinity Stones. This opens with before they were even a thing, like thousands of years before the Big Bang even happened, before the universe was made. There was this guy Arisham. So I'm there like, is this God? Essentially, like I don't know the comic books. Is this like meant to be the creator of absolutely everything in the comic books, or is there someone who he answers to as well? I don't know, and that still hasn't kind of been answered. But I am wondering if more material of this stuff did get cut out, because I can't remember if it was in trailer 1 for this film or if it was a concept art I'm remembering. I thought there was a big guy with like a staff that looked like Arisham, and he had like a staff, and he was like standing in the middle of like a meadow or something, like commanding people.
That's in Guardians 1, isn't it? The actual clip from Guardians 1. Is he really got the Power Stone and he smashes down and kills them all?
That's it. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was something tied with this film.
I think a lot of that was there, like the logic of what are the Celestials, and you know, just the one thing I'll say about how they shot this film. Again, I guess Dune adds to this, right? How they shoot scale, and some people think it's easy to shoot scale. It's really not, especially when you have the concept of literally, you know, a god of gods of planets. And one thing that really amazed me was, okay, the whole like birth of the Celestial being in the planet. That part looked beautiful. Not the volcanoes and the awful shit there. The whole hand coming out and the face, the sense of scale was so well done. And just her and her little Skype chats with him as well, when she was like almost maybe on his nose or something. I loved all of that. And the big thing I've had, which we spoke about before we hit live as well, is it time to do Galactus? Maybe not now, like Phase 4, but I think if Marvel wanted to do Galactus, because we've spoken in the past, me and you've had loads of conversations.
Times. Yeah, many times.
How tricky is it to do him? Is it ever going to get done in film? There have been 2 big things this year for me. This film, absolutely. The Celestial part of it. And then in Marvel's What If, I know you've not seen it all, there was the Ultron episode where Ultron basically enters the multiverse. But he gets so big, he actually bites into bites a multiverse, like bites into a planet. And it's like a really quick 1 second like montage. And I was there like, they can do Galactus. And I watched this one, I was like, they can do Galactus. And I'm just sat saying, I hope it's in the pipeline for Phase 5, not Phase 4. Or maybe not even Phase 5, maybe Phase 6. But I think after watching this, the 1,000,000% positive I'll say is that if they want to do Galactus, they should 100% go for it. Because they are capable of doing that, I think, now.
Yeah, they nailed it. And like the Arisham was probably like my favorite character in this film. I found him the most interesting. I loved the sense of scale, and I just love that something being out there in the cosmos that's beyond human comprehension, you know, in size and scope and everything he's created and will create. Brilliant. And, you know, not to spoil too much at the end of the film, but they do set it up where Arisham could return. Maybe he could be a big bad, or it's kind of the ramifications of that side of the cosmic stuff with the Marvel cinematic universe, which I'm really hoping they do mine a little bit more. Of course, we'll talk about the post-credit scenes in a second as well towards the end of this review. But yeah, I mean, we've had that conversation loads of times fairly recently. I want to say like in the last month or 2 months, maybe we had kind of a back and forth over Messenger with each other saying, we both love to see Galactus, but you know, we both said that I don't think it's physically doable, because if you do have this gigantic thing, how are you going to have the Avengers fighting him? It's going to be horribly impractical. And I still do kind of stand by that a little bit. If you are going to actually, you wouldn't be able to physically fight him. I don't think. Like, how do you
Yeah.
physically fight even Arisham in this film? Like, I don't even know how that's possible. When it pulls back to a wide shot, and obviously you can't even take in the whole scope of him in a frame, it's like maybe his shoulder and like side of his face, and you can't even see like Salma Hayek in the shot. She is like an even smaller than an ant. She's like a microbe compared to the size of Arisham. So I still think it would be difficult to do, but I think this film has kind of put a step in the right direction, where if a character like Galactus did show up, this giant planet-eating guy in a giant metal helmet, I think it would be easier to swallow for a lot of audience members now. So I'd still love to see it. You know, as soon as Thanos was out of the picture, I thought, well, where do you go after Thanos? You got to go bigger, and you can't really go bigger than Galactus, in my opinion. So we'll have to wait and see. But that side of the film was the stuff that I really enjoyed the most. And Arisham's probably in the film like 3 scenes, maybe in total. But loved it. Love that side of things. But unfortunately, again, as we said, 3 scenes, it's so few and far between in this film, that good stuff. And I kind of wish the whole film was like that. I was going to compare it to the first Thor film in terms of its structure a little bit, in that Thor opens up in present day, you know, and then Thor's hit with a car, and then we get some context to that. We go back, you know, we do the whole Asgard thing. We spend a lot of time there. We don't come back to Natalie Portman's character for a good portion. That kind of gets us up to speed of where we are. But then pretty much after that, it is mostly set on Earth, isn't it? And I think that's what you were saying. This should have either been in present day the whole time, or the majority of the time, or been in the past for the majority of the film. And it tried to have it both ways, and because of that, that's where the mishmash of the styles come in. Because this film really does have 2 openings. If you were going to take shears to this film and just cut stuff, I would cut all of that stuff out in London at the beginning with Kit Harington and Sprite and the Deviants, and you get that from the title sequence, you know, the Eternals are fighting the Deviants. I'm like, okay, brilliant, got it. And then you open in 5000 BC or whatever.
What I love is that she's in not Trafalgar Square,
the National History Museum. I loved it.
Wow.
Camden.
Better. Wait, she's at Piccadilly Circus, gets an alarm saying she's late, then gets to the National History Museum about 2 minutes away. That shit is like 45 minutes on the tube to go like that way. And I always laugh at, I mean, no one's ever going to get it right. It's probably like in every film, but I always laugh at stuff like that. Like, it's like they were like, the only thing they needed to milk being in London more was London Calling, the song from every other film that does it. But it was, the Camden stuff was great, because I don't think really films that have ever shot there before.
It was the shop fronts. I noticed the shop fronts. I was like, oh, I know where we are. This is kind of cool. I haven't had this in a film before where I'm calling out the locations this much, but
I want to quickly, as you mentioned, where do we go after Thanos? I guess it's time to talk about the credit scenes. Thanos' brother, everyone, Harry Styles. Now, I'm going to say, I'm curious. The big spoiler before the film came out was Harry Styles in this. This was done at the world premiere by a journalist who probably, hopefully, definitely won't be doing another Marvel premiere for his company ever again. They hid this from the press. The press screenings. They said that there wasn't any screenings of the first batch in America. I think it was at the UK ones after the spoiler already happened. But Harry Styles being in this film, I don't know much about the character. I know that he is like essentially the better brother of Thanos. He's the cocky, arrogant younger one. He just looks great. He can do this and that and the other. And I didn't really care. I'm going to say that because I knew it was happening. I had braced myself for the reaction. The reaction of my friends was great who didn't know. And I did hear a fuck off from the crowd at some point. But I will say this about Harry Styles. Dunkirk proved me wrong. I think he was very good in that film, a lot better than I thought he would be. And I know that he's got a couple of lead roles coming up in a few dramas. So long term, this could be a very smart casting choice. But it's selling Thanos having a brother is harder than they think to the general public, more so than comic book fans. Just because, as you said before your life, he's not purple or big or anything like Thanos. It's just, Thanos' brother by title. I don't know what you thought of that bit. Did you have it spoiled? I don't know if you did.
I didn't have it spoiled, so I didn't know what to expect from either credit scene. The Kit Harington. I'll talk about this one first. So,
Yeah.
I was done with this film. I wanted to go home. It was almost 1 a.m. In fact, I think it was 1 a.m. I was done. I just wanted to drive home and get into bed, and I had to wait for these credit scenes. And this CGI abomination strolls onto the screen, and he's like chugging a tankard of ale. And I seem to remember the character from the comic books. And then he said his name was Pip. I was like, I do remember that. I think it's Pip the Troll, isn't it? I don't know anything about it. This Gimli looking.
I knew it was Patton Oswalt. Oswalt because I could tell the voice. That's all.
This CGI Legend of Zelda Gimli looking motherfucker shows up. And I was like, that looks abhorrent. That is that 2021 CGI. That's the best that CGI can do with the best companies behind it. That's what we're doing. So he shows up and I'm like, this means something to someone and I don't care. I just want to go. Then there's this big dramatic reveal, isn't there, where he's walking down the corridor and he's in low lighting and you don't know who it is. And even when he was revealed, I recognized him and I couldn't place it. And then we had like a gaggle of women towards the right-hand side of the screen. It's like a big row of people. They take up like 8 chairs on like 2 rows in front of me or something like that. And they all screamed. And I thought, oh, okay. I've only had that reaction to one other person before, and that was when I went to see Dunkirk. So I think I know who that is. And Carl right here says, without spoiling the cameo, I mean, we're spoiling it right now. In the end credits, I actually heard audible groans in my screening. It was mixed. I think I audibly groaned a little bit.
I laughed.
But I was mostly groaning. I wasn't groaning at the fact that Harry Styles is in a Marvel film. Like, as you mentioned, he was great in Dunkirk. I was groaning at those making all the ruckus. And I groaned during Dunkirk for that reason as well when I went to see it for the first time. So, I mean, they've still got the fangirls, they've still got.
Oh, he's doing well music-wise, apparently. I'm not good with music, but I know that apparently
I'm not good with modern music, so I can't help you out with that one, I'm afraid. But I was like, sure, fine, this is going to mean something in Guardians of the Galaxy or Eternals 2, which, I'm going to absolutely dread going to see when it comes out. But yeah, because I don't know anything about the characters, I don't know anything about the comic books, I don't know what that means. And I was the similar way with Kit Harington's scene. We kind of cycle back to his character at the end. I was like, I don't give a shit about Kit Harington. He was quite wooden in the scenes that he was in the film. I don't think he's a particularly good actor from what I've seen him in. And he pulls out a sword. I'm like, okay.
I thought, oh, it's Longclaw. No, it's not.
And the sword's like speaking to him, and it looks like it's got this kind of like watery glow to it. And I was like, okay, he's going to have a magic sword. Is he going to be like some kind of medieval knight? Because they mentioned earlier that Cersei's character gave him like a ring that was part of his family history or like a family heirloom, and it was medieval. I was like, is he an Eternal? I thought it was going to be like the Michael Jackson yellow eye effect at the end, like at the end of Thriller. It was going to turn out that he was an Eternal all this time or something similar. But I'm guessing, again, he's a character in the comic books that people know and people are going to be very excited for, I'm sure. But I don't care that Kit Harington has a magic sword. I was just done. And the credit scenes didn't help that for me.
All I got hyped for was when I heard the other voice in that last scene. I was like, I don't remember what he said. I was like, that's Mahershala Ali.
So I didn't even clock that.
And that was it for me. I was like, the moment I was like, that's Blade. And I was like, here we go. And they didn't show him. It was over. And this is where Saul made a really good point saying that only people who are aware of an actor's voice, who isn't like and it sounds horrible. Yes, he's a 2-time Oscar winner. He's not an A-list. He's not. If Robert Downey Jr.'s voice came on, you'd know. But Mahershala Ali isn't known to the public as such. As like you're not even showing, you're telling, not showing. And this is where I was like, if you just showed Blade, people lost their minds, like more than Harry Styles. That'd have been insane. The rumors the last few weeks of Blade being in Moon Knight, there's a vampire joke in Eternals. And I'm just sat there saying, like, Mahershala Ali's Blade is something I've been more anticipated for. Any Phase 4 announcement, not including Spider-Man, Mahershala already being cast as Blade was the one that had me hyped from Comic-Con that year when they did them all. Okay, maybe Thor's going to get jumped in there for Taika, but and the fact they just get the voice and nothing else, and I thought I'm not going to criticize. I mean, I guess I can criticize it, but it's for a post-credit scene which isn't important to the film. Why would you hide it? If it's a tease, you're teasing a tease by not showing him, and I've never seen that done. Imagine if Iron Man 1 ended with Sam Jackson talking, but you never got to see it was Nick Fury. Like, how dumb would that look and sound? And
the only thing I can think of is, would it have been too much? We're setting up Pip the Troll, we're setting up Harry Styles, and then in the next one we're setting up Blade as well. Is it too much maybe at the end?
You didn't need Blade's voice in this. Like, if he's going to be introduced in Moon Knight of Oscar Isaac, great. Stick him in like Punisher for an episode like they did in Daredevil. Introduce him maybe in a character arc or two, and then give him the film to bounce off. But it's a very tricky thing to do, and it's really random. Like, obviously my comic knowledge is limited on the Eternals, but I'm pretty sure Blade's not an Eternals or probably used to hang out with them. So the Black Knight thing I'm curious for, but the curiosity comes from knowing nothing more so than being excited. And that's where I kind of like hang with. I think that epitomized the film for me, was that you didn't show Blade, you just heard him, and it's a really petty minor thing to say, but does that not epitomize what a mess of 2 hours 40 minutes has been?
Like, I think it would have been a really weird intro though if they'd have done it like that. I don't know why they put it in the first place. I don't know why they had to tease Blade at this point, because I think we were saying we don't even have a release date for it yet, do we? We have like a vague place on a slate of films, but that slate of films has been pushed back now and chopped and changed, and might even change again. We don't know. So, and I agree. I think Eternals would have been a very strange film to set up a character like Blade, because as far as I'm aware, he's got bugger all to do with that kind of cosmic stuff. He's a violent character. He goes around killing vampires, as far as I know. I think his father was Dracula or something, wasn't it? If I remember, I'm not sure.
He's better off being in Morbius, because there's going to be vampires in that film.
There you go. Maybe that's why they didn't do it. We got Jared Leto hamming it up. Oh boy, that's going to be a review for another time. Got the trailer for that, by the way, before this. Of course,
we didn't get anything. We got Matrix. We got Matrix Kingsman.
Didn't get that.
And not even Ghostbusters.
I got Ghostbusters again. Every film Ghostbusters is attached to it. Always annoys me. Every single film.
Another thing I like about Eternals, now the film is out, we never ever have to relive the IKEA trailer line. So I guess that's another positive. That line's done and dusted for history now. I don't know. There's been another terrible trailer line that I've had to put up with since. Because the Matrix trailer is pretty cool when it comes on the big screen. So
I'll be glad when I never get the Ghostbusters Afterlife. I'll be glad when that's out, so I don't get that trailer anymore, because it is for every film. I guarantee. I don't even know when Spencer's out. It might be the same week actually, or it might be out next week. I guarantee today. I'd go and see Spencer, and the trailer for Ghostbusters would be before it. I can guarantee 100%. They put it on everything. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to talk about. We've kind of talked about visuals. Soundtrack, I guess it is reuniting Ramin Djawadi with the MCU, who did the music to Iron Man 1 back in 2008.
Pre-Game of Thrones.
Yes. This soundtrack, I couldn't tell you any theme from there. Nothing jumped out to me in the film. Usually, sometimes a good soundtrack can elevate what's on screen. Didn't have any of that. There was no discernible theme for me. Maybe if I listened to the soundtrack on its own, you'd pick up on bits of that, but nothing came through. There were no character soundtrack, character leitmotifs or anything that carried me through it. It was just a serviceable Marvel score that was background noise to me, which I thought was a bit of a shame, because I do usually like Ramin Djawadi, and obviously his Game of Thrones stuff's fantastic. I think he did Pacific Rim as well, didn't he? Which was a really kind of catchy main theme to it as well. This one just had absolutely nothing for me as far as the music was concerned. One thing I did want to chuck in there really quickly as well, I saw like a kind of lot of clickbait articles come out before this film, and I wondered what they were talking about after seeing the film. Apparently, Superman Clark Kent is in this universe now. Now, the question is it Superman the film? The character in comic book form exists in the MCU, or is there actually a Superman out there? Because every time Richard Madden was on screen, doing what he's doing best, flying around, laser beam eyes. They even had that kind of Zack Snyder super speed punching, which I think came from the Death character. I was getting a lot of Man of Steel vibes from this, a lot of Superman vibes, and I mean they drop his name in the film. I think someone gets
I
called
got
Clark, don't they, or something?
I got a lot of Justice League thinks. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
like Angelina Jolie's Wonder Woman. You've got the Flash. You've got Superman. I guess the tech guy maybe counts as Batman because he controls the ship and everything else. And I was like, you actually have. This is kind of a Justice League film, better than the Justice League, but still got problems. I'd say that for sure. But it was just really funny seeing some of those comparisons. But yeah, I think it was the little kids like your Superman, and I just think so. I saw a few articles before, and I did see someone say that it's in Spider-Man 2. I think what's that? His neighbor's kids are called Billy or something. Where he kind of says that he mentioned Superman, and I think people say it's been said in a lot of things over the years. But we had a chat before, like we don't know, not even the legalities, but how on earth that kind of thing works. Because I mean, and then again, Black Sabbath did Iron Man. Did they have to get Marvel's approval? I don't ever know with this kind of thing. So I'm sure there's a lawyer somewhere for someone. Either
It's weird though, in sort of like, especially with like the modern landscape of superhero films. It'd be like if in the new, a new Superman film, a new Batman film, if they said, "Oh, who are you supposed to be, Iron Man?" Like that would be weird to me in a in a Warner Brothers made DC film. I don't know. It was strange. I don't know.
It's
We're
a weird
one step
one.
closer to Avengers versus Justice League. It's going to happen one day when both companies run out of money.
It'll be Disney will just buy them to beat them. It'll be like WWF back in the day.
Yeah.
With those lot. But yeah, I don't think there's anything else. I'm gonna round up my final thoughts because there's a lot of problems with this film, and I did my ranking last night after watching it, and I thought about it again this morning. I don't think I've been too much. This is second bottom of my MCU list, not including What If, because I don't really count that. It's like an animated spin-off show type thing. But and I don't dislike this film, but I don't like the film. It's got so many problems. It's got some good stuff. I'm at this really awkward positioning with it where if anyone's curious, the film below it's all the dialogue because it's a hell of a lot better than that film. And there are moments in this that are great, and then there are moments that don't work, and there are characters wasted and some characters earned. And again, the runtime's a big problem. So, if you've sat at the end of an hour-long spoiler discussion on this, you understand that obviously we've been able to speak about it. But this film, I think, maybe at the moment it's more of a disappointment than anything. Not that that's a big deal for me. That's disappointing, but just the manner of how the film's ended up. I think the best way I could describe it is 2 words, which is a missed opportunity. And that's what I'm going to leave it. And as I'm going to say before, if I'm going to recommend you a film to watch tonight, presume you've already seen this, go watch The Harder They Fall on Netflix. There are better films out. I don't need to go on the Dune hype train once more. It is a tragedy that Dune has been took off IMAX for this, I will say. This film utilized IMAX very, very, very well. It's just the release dates being far too close to one another, which was awful.
I don't know what I was watching this film and I was kind of trying to place in my head where I'd rank it. I don't know in terms of a ranking, but what I do know is for me, this film was hot garbage, almost beginning to end. Just structurally, I thought the script writing as well, the screenplay was terrible, really, really bad. And just lack of character development, character stakes, anything that I really cared about in a film. And if you don't care about what's going on or, the events that are taking place in the film, that's agonizing to sit through with any film runtime, but even especially so at a film that's 2 hours and 40 minutes, maybe even over 2 hours 40. I don't know what the exact runtime is. This felt agonizing for me. I wanted to leave, and the film just kept on going. And as you mentioned, there have been a couple of recent films out, very recently with a new James Bond film, with Dune, that do clock in around that time. And we both mentioned with both of those films, absolutely fly by because there is a story to tell there and the pacing's great and it's engaging and it keeps your interest. And usually a Marvel film can do that. I might not love the film, but there's usually something there. They jingle the keys in front of you, or there's set pieces, or there's moments of action that you can at least be somewhat entertained by, and nothing transpired in this film for me. Any vaguely interesting thing for me, the cosmic stuff, Arisham, some of the discourse between different factions of the Eternals throughout history, that was the stuff that was the most fascinating to me, and it felt like it was glossed over and they didn't delve into it on a deep level to really mine everything they could from that. So it's a weird hodgepodge of a film that's kind of like awkwardly thrown together. It felt like there were so many different cooks in the kitchen with what the film wanted to be, and they just kind of threw it all together in a very overly bloated package, and that's the Eternals. I went into this with an open mind. I didn't know anything about these characters. I stayed away from reviews went in almost completely cold to this thing, wanting to just, be at least entertained. And it did none of those things, unfortunately. So I think I dislike this film a little bit more than you, although I know you said that it is, second bottom on your MCU list. But yeah, and when it said at the end the Eternals will return, I was like, I know they will, and I'm going to have to go and see it. At the end it says the Eternals.
You can tell how much I remember.
I thought, I know they're going to. Of course they are. It's Marvel, and I'm going to have to go and see it because, obligation and everything ties in with each other. But I am going to be going into that film with the same level of enthusiasm as I will for the new Captain Marvel film. To me, that's my least favorite Marvel film is Captain Marvel. I don't know where I'd rank this one just yet because, Captain Marvel felt long, but it wasn't 2 hours, 40 minutes, I will say. And it is that runtime for me. And I do think that's going to put a lot of people off. It's going to be interesting to see what people think of it. But I mean, people have already let us know what they think of it, and with the fact that it's rotten, and will that continue to dip once more people go and see it, after this weekend? I don't know, but I do think it's going to have a massive drop off. And the question is, will it be Marvel's first big flop? Have they had a flop so far with any films that have come out?
I mean, on paper, box office wise, I'd assume I don't think Shang-Chi is actually, but on paper it'll be the COVID film. So
right, yeah.
Before that, technically not, but I think Black Widow's budget was like 200 mil plus, and that grossed like 360.
Right.
But the COVID's caused this box office black hole.
It's difficult to qualify it. Yeah.
I think most people are calling it the post-pandemic box office, which is probably the fairest term because no one has a clue what's happening. I wouldn't have thought Venom would outgross Black Widow and Shang-Chi at the start of the year, but here we are, and it has. So it's definitely going to outgross this. I will be curious to see this box office. I think the best way you can look at them now is the percentage drop of week 2. I think you look at films like Bond was getting drops of between 30 and 50%, which is very common pre-COVID. But then you've had like every Warner Brothers film getting a 70% plus drop off, which means that no one went in week 2. So it's going to be fascinating to see how it does. I think you'll get, as you said earlier, a very good first opening weekend. I reckon it'll go slightly underestimations. It won't have much word of mouth. And then next week will be the big test because obviously this is exclusive to cinemas too. Mm-hmm. So I will say it did look a hell of a lot better on an IMAX than it did in my room. I will say that they shot on IMAX cameras properly for long scenes, and that did help. That's another big plus. I think Chloe Zhao was like Denis Villeneuve. They both like shooting on IMAX aspect ratios, which I really appreciate too. But that all being said, we want to hear your thoughts on the Eternal. So comment below. This has been a spoiler discussion. Let them all come in. Whatever you think, we'll reply to those. We'll have a look at those messages. Hit the subscribe button. There's a lot more Marvel stuff on the way. There's a hell of a lot of Marvel stuff on the way. There's going to be Spider-Man reviews across November. There's going to be a new Spider-Man film in December. There's going to be Hawkeye in December. There's going to be way too much I can't even think about coming next year. But before we have all of those, we've got a rather large amount of reviews coming that aren't even comic related. So I'm just going to Arsene Wenger Invincible this Monday. The Ghostbusters retrospective kicks off this Monday as well. That's me, Chris, and Dave. We're going to be doing Ghostbusters 1, 2, and then Afterlife every Monday for the next 3 weeks. Expect Ghostbusters content. So do check us out on that. Tuesday, we have The Beginning. We have finally got to the Austin Powers films. That is going to be incredible to talk about. So expect Austin Powers films every Tuesday for the next couple of weeks. And on Thursdays, I'm going to hand over to Chris to talk about what else is happening with the Peter Jackson retrospective.
Yep, so next up on the retrospective is Brain Dead. That will be coming this Thursday, the 11th of November. I still haven't watched the film as of now. Me and Tate are on those. Both of us are kind of discovering for the first time Peter Jackson's earlier films in the lead up to December, where we're, of course, talking about the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I wanted to be as thorough as possible and go in Lord of the Rings with fresh eyes, knowing the films that Peter Jackson made beforehand. So currently we have 2 up on the channel. We've got Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles, which I had a great time with. And Brain Dead's going to be the next one. So that's going to be every Thursday. That's 10 p.m. GMT. And of course, as I mentioned, Thursday the 11th this week is going to be Brain Dead. So check out for that.
Definitely. So once again, thank you everybody for watching at home. And we'll be sure to see you on the next one. Take care.